Morning, everyone. So the Tory party conference is over. Basically, conference season is done now. Parliament's back in session next week. And in theory, what we should be looking at, or what I should be looking at if I was going to be serious, would be it's time for Labour to carry on with its legislative programme. We could start to look at, because there's two things, obviously, that Labour are going to be doing this month. At the end of the month, they're announcing their budget. That is the most important single thing they will be doing, and there's all attention on that. But it's just taking too long. And then there's the legislation. That's the other side of it. What new laws they're passing. So, but in reality, what's also very interesting is the fact that the Conservatives are going to start to whittle down the Tory leadership candidates down to the last two, which goes to members. And all eyes on the whole idea of this Tory party conference, the reason why they made the leadership contest last so long was deliberately so that they could let candidates appeal directly to party members at the conference. Obviously, you don't get all party members going there, but you get the most committed ones, the most active ones. So they would go to the conference and decide for themselves. That would give MPs a bit of a leaning. It would let them perform under pressure. So then you whittle it down to the final two, and then those two go off to the members. Now, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch damaged their campaigns. There were some things they said which were unpopular even for Conservatives, which was a bit of a cockle. Robert Jenrick basically accused the British Armed Forces of murder, and Kemi Badenoch suggested taking away free at point of access NHS care, which even a lot of Conservatives don't like the idea of, and most especially taking away maternity pay, which sounds crazy. However, according to reports, James Cleverly actually impressed on a number of levels. First of all, he didn't spend his time slagging off his leadership contenders. Now, if you ask me, it could be partly strategic in terms of he wants to appear as the one who will unite the party. But I reckon it's just because he doesn't necessarily care whether he wins or not. I think he'd probably like to win because that's the best way of finding himself in his own shadow cabinet. I just think it's because he wants to have a situation whereby no matter who wins, because he hasn't attacked them, they will still give him a job in shadow cabinet. It's a bit more money. So there we go. David's saying, I put money on Cleverly a while ago, got good odds. Yeah, you would have done. I gave him no chance not long ago and had a feeling the canny operator would find a way not to win while being up there. Cleverly probably won't get another swing at it. Oh, no, I'm sure he won't. I'm surprised he's getting a swing at it at all here, if I'm honest, because, first of all, he's tied very closely to both the Truss and Sunak governments. And second, he hasn't done anything. Like, he kept talking about how, not the conference necessarily, but, previously, how he focuses on delivery. And it's like, well, what have you delivered? He's been education secretary, he's been foreign secretary, he's been home secretary. In all honesty, what has he actually delivered? And when I say delivered, what I mean is he had a policy that is not straightforward and delivered it. I'm not being facetious because he's a Tory. He actually hasn't done anything. He might say, I don't know because no one's asked him, but he might say, for example, oh, well, I adjusted immigration rules and that's helped get immigration down. For example, he made it harder for foreign students to come here, which wasn't exactly helpful. But that's not delivery, because although he technically did do it, it wasn't difficult. All he had to do was order it. Like, in terms of delivery, it's like, what have you done? What policy have you had that was not straightforward, that was not guaranteed, that wasn't just a case of you ordering something? What have you actually done? The answer is nothing. He hasn't done anything. But anyway, never mind that. In terms of his realistic prospects, so I'm going to move myself because I've shifted. There we go. I moved in my seat. Here are the results from ballots. I'm going to show you how, although people keep saying, oh, is it going to be Jenrick and Badenoch on the final ballot? I'm thinking, probably not. No, because look at the situation. So the first ballot, I've got the results up here. First ballot, so Jenrick and Badenoch were ahead there. Jenrick significantly ahead on 28. Priti Patel lost because she was the one knocked out first of all. She got 14 votes. Then you can see in round two how her votes distributed themselves. So Most of her votes went to either Jenrick or Badenoch. Some of them weirdly went to Tom Tugendhat, possibly because he wants to leave the ECHR, right? But nonetheless, that's how they distributed themselves. 4 of them went to Tom Tugendhat, but the remaining 10 distributed themselves between Badenoch and Genrich. And you go, well, that makes sense because Priti Patel is pretty right wing. So obviously her supporters distributed themselves mostly along the very right wing candidates, yeah? So now look what happens. Now Mel Stride's gone. He was a moderate, right? Mel Stride's gone. So there's 16 votes up for grabs there. Where are they likely to go? They're not likely to go to Jenrick or Badenoch. You might get the odd one. No one's saying you won't get the odd one. But by and large, you would think they're going to distribute themselves around Cleverly and Tugendhat. Now, we'll find out pretty soon because next week there'll be another round of voting. I'm not sure what the schedule is. It might even be that there's 2 rounds of voting next week. Maybe they do one on Monday, one on Friday. I don't know. But there's certainly going to be at least one more next week because the contest has got to, they've got to get the ballots out to members pretty quickly. So in actual fact, what's going to happen is I think you're going to start to see Tugendhat and Cleverly. They'll get more votes. You might get the odd one going up here, but they'll get most of those votes, right? Then there'll be another round. So it'll be down to 3 then. I think Cleverly will get most of them on the basis of this conference. Because he seems to have impressed the members, because Tugendhat is making no real impression, I think moderate Tory MPs are going to start to see Cleverly as the most likely to be, because I think they don't want Jenrick or Badenoch, right? I think there are Tory MPs who recognise that they don't need that nonsense. I mean, James Cleverly's main appeal yesterday in his little speech was, can we be more normal? Can we be more normal, please? And I will say this for James Cleverly. So for all the things I could use to criticise him, I will actually argue that he probably is the more normal of the 4. Apart from anything else, he did not engage in the culture wars. I'll say this for him. He didn't engage in the culture wars. He didn't call it out, but, party politics. But he never put much store by it. So you could also imagine, although he might pay lip service to it to keep MPs on side, he's probably not going to push it as a Tory leader either. So I can see moderate Tory MPs thinking, Cleverly, because he seemed to be well received by members, he's got a decent chance. Because normally you would think what'll happen is on the ballot, you'll have either Genrick or Badenoch for the crazy option, and then you'll have either Cleverly or Tugendhat for the non-crazy option. And the members will pick the crazy option because they just always do. But maybe they'll be thinking, maybe Cleverly, maybe Cleverly could win. And there was that polling. Now, Cleverly commissioned the polling, fair enough. But it nonetheless was serious polling. It was a decent polling company, and they all published their results. And that suggested that Cleverly had a decent chance of beating the others. So I think Cleverly is going to attract most of those Stride votes. And Tugendhat probably then goes out. And then think to yourself, where will Tugendhat's votes go? Again, you can't rule out some of them going to Badenoch and Genrich, but you would think most of them will go to Cleverly. So you look at the way the second ballot results look now, and you think, imagine Stride's votes mostly distributing themselves between Cleverly and Tugendhat. Then Tugendhat goes out. Then imagine those votes distributing themselves mostly behind Cleverly. And all of a sudden, Badenoch's not there. You're probably looking at Genrich and Cleverly. At this point, I would be surprised if Cleverly did not make it onto the final ballot. In fact, in theory, because it now comes down to who's with him. It could be Genrich or Badenoch. Is it Genrich, or did is he getting himself into too much of a mess with scrutiny over that £75,000 donation and those dealings with Richard Desmond, where he fiddled, he allowed him to fiddle £45 million worth of basically council taxes. it's not guaranteed to be Genrich who's on the ballot with him. People might think, well, actually, Badenoch at this point seems the least of a liability for the far right option. But I am looking at this and thinking, yeah, Cleverly could absolutely do it. I'm just going to get rid of that. It's covering up my badger. So then it comes down to what sort of Tory leader would Cleverly be. I'm not suggesting Cleverly is the favourite to win, by the way. I'm just saying he now has a much more realistic shot than I would have. I mean, I didn't have to put a bet on it, but when I chose to put a bet on it at the start of the contest, I actually put it on Genrich. But Genrich's been messing up. He's made unforced errors. Some of the things I wouldn't call messing up, like getting into trouble over the Desmond thing, getting into trouble over that donation. Those aren't necessarily unforced errors. They're just ones he hasn't dealt with well, but you could argue it's quite difficult to deal with them. But he has made, I mean, that accusing British forces of murder is an unforced error. Also, his banging on about the European Convention of Human Rights, it's not a vote winner. It's not even strictly necessary, I think, to get himself made leader of the Tory party. I don't think, even if, I don't even know what the majority of Tory members think about the policy. I know a lot of them will go, oh, yeah, we should leave. But that's only because people have told them we should leave. Or they've told them that it's stopping us deporting immigrants, which isn't true. But there we go. Oops, hang on. Sorry, I've lost. Things messed about. Oh, talking about the Genrich's accusing British things of murder. It says secrecy means they can't produce witnesses. Genrich knows that. No, I don't think Genrich's being at all cunning here as well. He can't possibly have been in receipt of such information. Like, remember, Johnny Mercer is getting into enough trouble. I don't know what's happened with that, because he made certain accusations along similar lines, but more specific accusations. And he is credibly in receipt of evidence. And that evidence is being demanded of him. So you can't say secrecy means they can't produce witnesses. They absolutely can. Because there is a public inquiry going on right now into misconduct on the part of British forces abroad. So, no, there can absolutely be an investigation. And witnesses will be required. Like Johnny Mercer is risking getting himself into prison for contempt of court because he's refusing to substantiate his claims. So no, there's no suggestion that Genrich is safe because it's legally impossible to demand he produce witnesses. No, he can absolutely be. If Labour decide to go on this, and I've said myself, what Starmer should do to completely destroy Genrich and cause a massive row in the Tory party, right? Anyone who watched my video yesterday on my own channel will know this, but for those who didn't, this is what I would do if I was Starmer. Next week in Parliament, at the start of PMQs, I would get permission from the Speaker to make a statement, an important statement. And this is what that statement would be. I would say that the Honourable Member for Newark made serious accusations against our British Armed Forces, accusing them of murder. I have demanded to know if there is any evidence of this at all. And I have been told categorically there is not. And then what Starmer should do is he said, so I call upon the Honourable Member to either substantiate these claims or to admit that he was making it up for political gain. And he's not accusing him of lying, so we can do that in Parliament because he's just asking Genrich, are you a liar or are you going to substantiate these claims? And I would put the emphasis on him. I would maybe even threaten a formal investigation, because that's he could even lay it on thick and to say, and just to remind him, if the latter, then making up lies again about our brave British forces, really lay it on thick, could cause serious damage to morale, as well as damage to our international reputation, and actually endanger the lives of our British forces abroad. So really lay it on thick. Really get Genrich in a position where he has to say something instead of just quietly leaving it. Absolutely destroy him. And if you think to yourself, well, maybe Labour would like Genrich to stay in, and they don't want to destroy him because they want him to stay in the contest. I would say no. Labour would prefer Badenoch to lead the Tory party than Genrich anyway. That's what I would do if I was Starmer. And the other thing is, it would stop the press going on about pissing suits and glasses and Taylor Swift tickets, because this is way spicier. Anyway, Ivan Ambrose, back to James Cleverly, $9.99 super chat, thank you. Says, Cleverly changes his mind whenever it's convenient for him. This week he said the Rwanda policy would have worked, yet when the Tories were in power said it wouldn't work. Well, yeah, well, he didn't say that publicly though, did he? We knew, he didn't deny it. When Yvette Cooper accused him of saying it was batshit, he didn't deny it. But again, yeah, I mean, that's politics in general. If Cleverly thinks that his party is wedded to the idea, then yeah. But the thing is, I don't think they are. I mean, it should be dropped. It's a failed policy. I mean, this is the thing with James Cleverly. If you actually look and listen to what he said, if you think to yourself, okay, so what are his policies? What are his plans for winning the next election for the Conservatives? And it's like, he talks about the Rwanda plan. Well, that's a failed policy altogether. It's actually quite funny. When he's talking about Conservative achievements, he talks about the Olympic Park. This shows just, again, he is not clever, right? They do this all the time. It's a proper sign of being thick. So it's like, oh yeah, Boris Johnson's Olympic Park. It's like, mate, it was commissioned while Ken Livingstone was mayor, Labour mayor. They don't ever think about that. They just say, oh, and it was finished when Boris Johnson was mayor. Yeah, but it was started when Labour were mayor. Anyway. And when Labour were in government. But never mind. He's talking about getting rid of stamp duty, and it's like, okay. It's sort of something you would expect to be somewhere in a Conservative manifesto, but it's not going to be a big vote winner. It's just something you want to do. Like, I've looked down at all of his policies and I've just thought, no. He hasn't got anything there that is actually going to appeal to voters. And I'm not sure it's all that appealing to anyone within his party either. Anyway, there was another super chat. Alec Barrett, £5, thank you. It says, Cleverly and Badenoch as the final two. God help us, how will the Tory members pick between the two? Well, I don't know. Genrich at the moment, going into the conference, Genrich was the one who seemed to be nailed on for a final ballot place. Not just because he was getting the most votes so far, that could turn overnight. Just because he also seemed the most assured. Like, Tory MPs know that Badenoch is too combustible, shall we say. She's one Tory described her as being able to pick a fight in an empty room, and she is like that. So I still think Genrich's probably favourite for the final ballot. But that is another reason why I think Starmer should hammer Genrich's statement. He should properly put him under the cosh next week. Because that way, actually have the investigation. He should call, the Defence Secretary Healy, and he should say, I want this investigated. Calling David Lammy, I want this investigated. Is there any evidence at all that this is happening? We know it's not, because Genrich said the reason why British forces were murdering terrorists rather than capturing them when they had an option is because the European Court of Human Rights would order their release. Well, that's not true. They wouldn't, and they never have. That's categorically untrue. The European Court of Human Rights would never, ever, ever order the release of someone who's been imprisoned for terrorism. And they never have, and they never will. So he's lying about the reasons. Therefore, we also know he's lying about the fact of it. But make a big song and dance about it. Martin James, £5 there, saying Genrich might be a better Tory leader for Labour. No, not at all. Don't get me wrong. Because Genrich has made this is an unforced error, this accusation against British forces. It's an unforced error. It's a cock-up. And the sort of person who would make such a stupid error, for which Starmer has the option of properly hammering him, properly destroying him. Starmer can utterly destroy him next week and should do. I'm not sure he will, but he should do. I can think of no reason why he wouldn't. But yes, so you could say, even if he doesn't, the fact that he made this error means he will make other errors. But so will Badenoch. And Badenoch will just... Do you know what? Our little prediction here, if Badenoch ends up as Tory leader, right, over the next few years, if you are someone who looks at political cartoons, let me tell you this, you're going to see multiple political cartoons where Kemi Badenoch is like characterized as a screaming toddler in the supermarket, because that's what she's like. She starts fights with her own side, with people it's not just that she picks fights with people that she doesn't need to. It's not, and like, anyone needs to know in life to pick your battles, don't they? It's like with anything. Doesn't matter with kids or with colleagues or members of the public. If you're a politician, you pick your fights. There are some fights that you're not going to win, so you don't have them. You avoid them. Part of the skill in life is avoiding fights you just don't need to have, that are not going to, where either the chance of success is very low or the gains are very low, or both. You just avoid them. And she doesn't. She just, she's like me. When I was young, I was a bit like that. I was a bit of a firebrand when I was young. I couldn't let anything go. But as you get older, you're supposed to mellow a bit. And although she is young, she's not that young. But there we go. But no, Genrich is not like that. So, Genrich, it will take longer to break him down. Mind you, that being said, it almost doesn't matter who wins anyway, because Boris Johnson's waiting in the wings. Boris Johnson is going to wait a few years, then he's going to make it. Well, he's already making it known that he'll probably be available in a few years. So from Boris Johnson supporters' point of view, they're just expecting whoever takes over from Sunak is like an interim leader while Johnson decides he's ready again. So that could be interesting. So that's the thing as well. Whoever wins, they're going to have to watch their backs, because if they don't get the polls looking good in a couple of years, Scott's saying, you feel a firebrand? No way. I don't know if that's sarcasm or not, but I actually, when I was young, I was a bit of a bugger. So I've never been one for putting up with bullshit. I will always challenge bullshit, even amongst but you would think that's mad at work, because my wife, for example, keeps going on about, oh, this idiot's done this thing. I keep saying, we should tell them. No, I want to keep my job. And I was thinking, right. So when I was young, I had no compulsions about telling a senior manager that they were doing something incredibly stupid. But when I was young, I did it in the wrong way. Whereas when I got older, I still used to do the same thing, but I would be more diplomatic. I'm not very diplomatic, but I used to be more diplomatic. So it didn't get me into trouble when I was older. But when I was young, absolutely. I mean, you should see a resignation letter I once wrote. I wish I'd kept a copy of it, because that bit me on the arse. I was very rude to my boss. The only phrase I remember is I referred to them as a blight upon humanity. It's not really very diplomatic, but there was much worse in it. Anyway, never mind. I've forgotten the details and I didn't keep the letter. Hey, on there saying, I remember when she started having to go with Lindsay Hoyle in the House of Commons in the same one. Yeah, that's what I remember. So, I mean, that for me was the point at which I thought, oh yeah, Kemi Badenoch, she's got no political future, because like Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, both very thin-skinned. You challenged them, they didn't like it. You could see it in their face. They hated it. They were very tetchy, very thin-skinned, and yet, whenever the speaker used to pull them up on something, they would just apologise, and then they'd carry on misbehaving anyway. They didn't pay any attention to him. But they would at least go, they would at least give the impression of deferring to his authority. Kemi Badenoch was picked a fight with him. She had him shouting and screaming. It was ridiculous. Anyway, putting a £10 super chat, thank you. It says, if I were a Tory member, I'd see Badenoch as the best option, because 1, she'll cause trouble for whoever is leader. 2, the next leader is doomed to fail. And 3, she'll likely crash and burn the quickest. So you could, okay, so there is an argument there. There is an argument that whoever is leader next is buggered anyway, so may get rid of the crap one. So because you could argue, if Badenoch loses, then a few years' time, she could become the Ian Duncan Smith. So she could be the leader after the next election, and then you're basically throwing away another parliament. That is possibly true. But I don't think Tory members are going to think like that. They're going to think to themselves that, because here's the thing, like, from my point of view, if you ask me, what do the Tories need to do to win the next election? Now, part of that calculation is trust to luck, because if Labour actually deliver tangible benefits, then it doesn't matter what the Tories do, they're not going to win, because people will remember the 14 years of Tory failure. If Labour give them, by the next election, although it might have been a shaky start, well, actually, they have fixed this, and this is getting better, then they're going to vote Labour. That's all there is to it. They don't know what the Tories do. But remember, from the point of view of Conservatives, committed Conservatives, they believe Labour are going to fail. Like, I'm looking at it and thinking, well, I don't think they are. It's possible. I can't rule it out until we see those tangible improvements. Because it's one thing to have policies. It doesn't matter whether you agree with the policies. Actually carrying them out is another matter. You know, it's why I keep warning about populists. Populists always sound like they've got the easy answers. But saying you're going to do a thing and actually being able to do it even when you've got the power to do it, two different things. Like, everyone who goes to the Olympics has the power to win a gold medal, but only one does. So, you know, but conservative people who are committed Conservatives, they believe Labour are going to fail because that's what they believe. They always believe that. So they believe Labour are going to fail. So that side of the equation is fine for them. So they will focus on what do we need to do to win. So they will absolutely believe that the next election is winnable. So I don't think Tory party members in any great numbers will dismiss the next election as basically lost and therefore think of just throwing away a clearly unsuitable candidate so she doesn't become leader later. So I'm not sure they will think like that. We can think like that because we're thinking to ourselves, as long as Labour deliver, the Tories have got no chance anyway. And we can also think they probably are going to deliver tangible improvements, whether they're good enough or whether they're as good as they could be is another matter, that they are going to be, people's lives are going to be better than they are now. But if you don't believe that, yeah, so no. Brighton Hove, actually, I once told a boss he was living in a cloud cuckoo land. Yeah, that's quite tame for me. That is quite tame for me. Do you know, I always sort of give this, there's a classic thing that managers will sometimes do with you, which never works with me. You know, they'll do the thing where they're going to do something stupid. And I was always the one who would tell them it was stupid. And I would explain why it was stupid and exactly how it was going to go wrong. But I would always make it clear to them that they're the boss, they get to decide. I'm just warning them what's going to happen. But what a lot of managers will do, because they don't want you coming back saying, I told you so, they'll try and get consensus. So they'll do like a meeting where they say, okay, can we all agree this is what we're going to do? And people sort of feel they have to go, yeah, like that. And then they've got you to nail your colours to the mast. So when it all goes tits up, it's all your fault, right? Whereas I am the one in the meeting going, no, I don't agree. I'll do it because you're the boss, but I don't agree. This is going to go badly wrong. And when it does go badly wrong, I'm going to remind you that I told you it would go badly wrong. So it never used to work with me because, and usually what would happen then is those managers would think twice before, because that's what you have to do. If you let them do something stupid and then you take collective responsibility, they'll just do something stupid again. Whereas if you call out that it was really stupid without managing to lose your job, then the next time they'll maybe think twice about it. So you're actually improving the efficiency of the organization by telling managers that they're stupid. You just have to do it diplomatically. You don't actually like punch their ego, because that doesn't do anyone any good at all. It's a bit like people protesting about various things. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sort of like Brexit or the winter fuel payments or anything like that. If you've got people who are just shouting through a megaphone, oh, Labour are crap, they're evil, they're just as cruel as the Tories. It's like, okay, that's going to persuade them, is it? That's going to bring them round. Whereas my argument is, if you want to persuade people of something, explain how it's in their interests. You can still be honest with them. You can still tell them that you think they're getting it wrong, but do it in a way that is like appealing to them. Think about it. What is going to appeal to them? Viv saying, I'll bet you're great in staff meetings. Well, my favourite story, I was telling Graham about this recently, but my favourite story, I'll leave you this as the final one. Now, this was many years ago. This was back when I was young, actually, and used to piss managers off too much, right? So it wasn't when I was older and more sophisticated. But there was a brilliant meeting where, so in colleges, you have something called value. We had it in schools as well, but in colleges, it's a bigger thing called value added. So you don't just judge a college on the sort of the raw results you get for students. You compare it with what should they have got. So if they come in with certain GCSEs, what grade should they have got at A level? Because you don't expect someone who comes in with like GCSEs that are only just good enough to go onto A levels to suddenly get an A or an A star, right? So you have this measure that sort of says that judges a college according to its value added. You know, how good are the results compared with what they should have got with what they came in? And there's different ways of measuring this, of course, because it's a statistical tool. So this woman came in one time and she was going to she explained to us how this new system was going to work. So, and at various points she would stop and she would like ask if there were any questions, and my hand would go up every single time. She'd get to my question, I would ask a question, she would answer it. Fine. Then at one point she said something. I thought, hang on a minute, she just contradicted herself. So when it came for questions, I put my hand up and I said, "You've just said this," and she said, "Yeah," and I said, "But that contradicts what you said earlier on when you said this. So you're, one of those two things can't be true." And she couldn't answer it. And then what would happen every time it came time for a break for questions, my hand would go up, but she wouldn't ask me. She'd ask other people and then say, "Right, we have to move on now." So, and other people in the room clocked what was going on. So what happened then, the next time questions were called, my hand went up. No one else's hand went up. And she just looked around. So just my hand, she asked any questions. My hand went up very clearly, no one else. And she went, "No, okay, we'll continue." And everyone started laughing. So she just didn't. So that's sort of what I was like. That was also quite tense because I wasn't rude to her. I wasn't telling her she was an idiot. I was just pointing out how she was. Because what had happened with this, obviously what happened with this meeting, you know how you get like some manager has to deliver a PowerPoint, but they don't understand it themselves. So they just try and bluff it. They produce a nice shiny PowerPoint. They have some notes. They just read out the notes and hope no one asks any questions because they don't really understand it themselves. They got someone else to do it. I'm the one who asked the questions. So I was never, if I ever had any ambitions of climbing the ladder, it was never going to happen, ever. Rosenberg said, "I wish I had you as a teacher or lecturer." Well, you wouldn't if you were a manager, because I was a pain in the arse. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of day. Apparently, it's a much nicer rest of day. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe as well. Until next time, I'll see you later.